Okay. What's the name of the session?
It's not what we think.
What teenagers really need, it's not what you think. So what did you think? You didn't even think. Love is good. Acceptance is good. Warmth, direction, validation, trust, money. No, the parents who raise teenagers need the money. Boundaries, yeah. What do you say? To feel needed. Self-esteem. They need to give. What else? What? Expectations? All of these are fantastic things. These are all good. So it is what we thought it was. All right, so what am I doing here? Let me start with one approach, but how about we do this? I know that this is an official thing, and I'm standing up here, and you're sitting over there, and there's even a video camera. So yeah, there is a video camera. Don't worry, I don't think it sees anybody. I think it just sees me. I don't think it sees anyone. It could hear you. If you speak up, it'll hear you, but it won't. It doesn't see you. Why don't we go like this? I want to go in a particular direction, but I'm not really, I'm not stuck on that. So can we try to make this as interactive as possible? Yeah? I didn't even get a response to the question if we can make it interactive.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. Definitely. After my talk about the 12 psukim, I was speaking to someone, and I guess she was responding to what I had said about the 12 psukim. We're not supposed to be just memorizing the wording, but internalizing the ideas. And she asked, how do we accomplish that? And I said, well, it's very, very hard to have a conversation with a room full of 30 children. I don't think it really matters so much what we tell them, it's what we lead them to tell us. Conversation has to be two ways. And in that conversation, the teacher may be talking more often than the student, but what the student says is more important than what the teacher says. In other words, at the end of the class, what really matters is not what the teacher has said, but what the student has come away able to say. And the only way for that to happen is a conversation. Frontal teaching, lectures, really, really don't cut it. Unless you're talking to adults who are highly, highly motivated, in which case, after the lecture, they're going to go discuss whatever it is they heard in the lecture. But even then, the major benefit they're getting is not from having heard the lecture, but from the discussion that they're going to have. So when you're on the bus going back to Crown Heights or wherever it is that you're going after this, and you're going to discuss things that you heard people saying, that's when it's going to really click with you. And a month from now, when you have a discussion about it, it's going to click even more. So anyways, that's just my commentary about that issue. And I would like to try to practice what I preach and not just give a lecture. I could do a lecture. I could do it if that's, and the truth is, if you were all teenagers, I would be forced to, because unfortunately, most of our teenagers don't know how to handle the flow of a conversation, and they either know be silent and be spoken to, or run around and do whatever you want. Those are the two settings. Why are you interrupting me? What do you say? Right. Option A is I can lecture, and I know that I'm the only one talking, but I'm probably the only one who's listening. Or B, I can let it be hefker. I don't like either of those options. Can we get an option C? Can we? Can we get an option C? What? No. Group, yeah, group is good sometimes, yeah. By the way, traditionally, throughout the several millennia that Jewish people have been studying Torah, the major format of study is chavrusa, yeah. Yeah, it's tried and true, works, yeah.
So how come the Rebbe really lectured us, if you want to call it that, but he was teaching us?
The Rebbe had 40 years to download an incredible amount of information. And the Fabrengens, where the Rebbe was speaking 4, 5, 6 hours, were really just, I don't want to call it half because that implies a proportion, and I don't know the proportion, but really just a part of what the Rebbe was doing. There was also a tremendous give and take. So it wasn't just what the Rebbe was saying, it's the response that the Rebbe was eliciting. I'll give you an example, classic example. Rashi Sichos. The purpose of the Rashi Sicha was not for the Rebbe to prove that he could learn Rashi. It wasn't even to entertain people who enjoyed hearing the Rebbe's lumdus in Rashi. The purpose of the Rashi Sichos was so that regular Chassidim should learn the Rashi this way, and therefore the Rebbe would constantly, you don't see it in Likutei Sichos, because in the edited format, you know, they take this out, but if you learn the Fabrengens, the way the Rebbe spoke, the Rebbe will be saying, where are the Horas HaTamimim? Why didn't people write articles about this? I taught this klal last week. Why didn't anyone ask me this question? And the whole style was klolim, was teaching principles. You know, it's like when you take a math test and you can't just give the answer, you have to show your work. The Rebbe showed his work. The Rebbe showed the principles by which he was answering these questions. And the goal in the end was that everybody should be able to have this, call it a mahalech or derech halimud. So really what's important is not to be able to say how the Rebbe learned the Rashas that the Rebbe taught. Really what's important is to be able to learn the Rashas that the Rebbe didn't teach us. You know, the Tana, Rabbi Akiva, he started off, the Tana Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir started off going to Rabbi Yishmael. And he learned the Mishnayos. He learned the Teresh Baal Peh, the body of knowledge. And then afterwards he went to Rabbi Akiva, and he learned, it says, Gama Gamara. He learned the style of putting the information together, extracting insights. You know, Rabbi Akiva's signature was that he could even read the calligraphy. He could read the tagin. He was able to extract information to the extent that when Moshe Rabbeinu was transported through time and was in the class of Rabbi Akiva, he couldn't keep up. He couldn't follow, and he was sad. And then he asked, how do you know this? And Rabbi Akiva said, it's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. And Moshe realized, wow, I guess I knew it, but without knowing it. It was Rabbi Akiva who unpacked it. So, in other words, Rabbi Meir, he went to Rabbi Yishmael, and he learned the information. But then he went to Rabbi Akiva, and he learned what to do with the information. So who was Rabbi Muvhak? Who was his main teacher? The one who taught him the information, or the one who taught him what to do with the information? Google can only give you information. It can't teach you how to take apart information. It can't teach you analysis, right? By the way, which is Chochmah and which is Bina? Right. And when Moshe Rabbeinu had to look for, when he was implementing Yisro's plan, he was looking for Chachamim and Nevonim, but the Nevonim he didn't find. And Rashi explains the difference between a Chacham and a Novin. It's like the rich money changer and the enterprising money changer. The rich money changer, it's like, you know, you go to the airport and they have the foreign exchange. They change your money. So you need to change your bills, and you go over to them, and they have a different currency, and they change it. But if there's no business, then they just sit there and they do nothing, and they don't care. They're getting paid by the hour. You know, the people at the foreign exchange booth in the airport. That's like a chacham. You have whatever you have. A novein is like Rashi says, sholchani togar, an enterprising money changer. Okay, here's what I got. I got a $5 bill and a 10 euro note and 20 English pounds. I got to do something. I got to make a move. So he goes and he finds somebody who's got pounds who needs dollars, and he makes a switch with him. And he finds a guy who's got dollars and needs euros, and he makes a switch with him, and he drums up business. And then at the end of the day, he made a profit. He made a profit out of what he had started with. He was only started with whatever he was starting with. But at the end of the day, he turned it into more. So a novain takes whatever you've got and you turn it into more. You turn it into more than what you've got. Which is, by the way, what it means, mitalmidei yesem ekulam, is the greatest insights I will ever have are not my own, but rather what my student tells me I said that I didn't even realize that I said to them. Oh, I said that? Yeah, that was good. That was really good. Right? Like Moshe Rabbeinu had that experience with Rabbi Akiva. Oh, I said that? Oh, wow, okay. That's really good. I guess I did say that. How much of education going on is in the realm of chokhmah, meaning retention of information, and how much is learning how to think, learning how to take a piece of information you already have and turning it in the sunlight and watching the different facets light up? It's a rhetorical question. You can, each one of us can think about it for ourselves. It always breaks my heart when one of our kids says that I didn't learn how to think until I went to college. And it breaks my heart because if you're going to tell me you find the information more interesting, okay, okay, you like learning poetry more than you like learning Gemara, lahavdil. Okay, but to tell me that's where you learned how to think, that you weren't intellectually stimulated, that's insanity to me. Yeah, interrupt me, please.
You invited us to, that's why I am.
I know. I wasn't being sarcastic.
It's okay, I'm not either.
Okay, good.
In the blurb, you say, I'm assuming you wrote it.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Well,
Speakers never write their blurbs.
the blurb that says that that all this talk, which is good talk and interesting, and I appreciate it, needs to be preceded by an understanding of teenagers' needs. So I was wondering if you were gonna
Get back to that. You're really bossy, really. So I'm going to flip it on you. A teenager is really an adult, right? 12-year-old girl, 13-year-old boy, they're adults. According to Torah. According to the Jewish religion. I hope that we don't consider the Jewish view of anything to be just another view. It is the definitive view. Now, if you want to explain what the difference between an adult and a child is, we can talk about that. The difference between an adult and a child is das. You can have a little child who's a big chochem and even a big novain, but they don't have das. You can have a little kid who's a little professor, precocious, he knows a lot. That's chokhmah. He can even explain it really well, that's bina, but he doesn't have das. And that's why children are not obligated in mitzvahs like adults are, because they just don't have the ability to be morally responsible. Moral responsibility requires das. What's das? Das is the ability to focus. Yeah, that's right. What was that? The Perek Gimel of Tanya. Litkaya b'machshavtai, to focus. Then in Perek Mem Beis it talks about the bechinas Moshe Rabbeinu, nitzitz of Moshe Rabbeinu in you. But what does it do? It's not just focus. It's the ability to focus on an idea. What's an idea? What's the difference between an idea and a thing? An idea is abstract and a thing is concrete. Okay, now children relate readily to the concrete, right? In fact, when you're a baby, everything is sensorial. Your knowledge of everything is sensorial. So when a baby encounters anything new, what's the first thing the baby does? Put it in the mouth. That's right. Because if I'm going to know anything new, it's all tactile. It's all sensorial. And a baby's knowledge of the world is not about ideas, not about right and wrong, but about hungry, tired, wet, dark, light, cold. And then what happens is, as you grow, you develop the ability to relate to abstraction. Abstraction means ideas. Ideas, you remember what the Alter Rebbe says? He says it as a mashal. It isn't the nimshal, it's not the point there, but it's an interesting mashal. When he talks about Shari Yechav Ramuna, that you can't say that Hashem is Chokhmah. Hashem's way above Chokhmah. Because he says, if you would say that Hashem, you can't even say Hashem is so smart that we can't relate to him with our smarts. Because that's like saying, remember the mashal the Alter Rebbe gives? That's like saying an idea is so deep that you can't touch it with your hands. Well, even dumb ideas can't be touched with your hands, right? It's not that this idea is a really smart idea. Oh, how smart? You can't even touch it. Well, you can't touch any ideas. Ideas are abstract. So as a child grows, they develop more and more abstract thinking. Now, morality, by definition, is abstract. That's why animals have no right and wrong. You know, a cheetah in the jungle is hungry and he pounces on the antelope. There's no guilt. It's not right or wrong. It's just, I was hungry. I did it. An adult has das. And das is the ability to concentrate on an abstract concept until you react to it as being just as real as our default settings react to things that are concrete. So, you touch a stove and it burns and you pull your hand away and say, ow, you don't do that again. That's empirical, right? That's the scientific method. You test it out. But, what about Chilul Shabbos? I'm not talking about I'm talking about a little kid who touches muktzah and then one day learns they develop a sensitivity. Don't touch the muktzah. How do you develop, it doesn't burn. How does a child develop this concept of not touching muktzah? Or you are allowed to touch muktzah. You're not allowed to be metaltal muktzah. You can't move the muktzah, right? So how does a child develop this concept? It's not empirical. They have to develop an appreciation for abstraction. And a child who's very concrete has a struggle with that, don't they? I can tell if an object is heavy or light, sharp or dull, but if it's a kli malachte le'isser, or it's muktzah masgufa. These are not things that you relate to empirically. These are things that you have to have some, abstract knowledge. Even something like kashrus, is there chemically a difference between kosher food and not kosher food? I mean, could you test it in a lab? I guess you could test the presence of, let's say, a behema tamea. But I'm saying, is there a way to test between a nevela and a shchuta? A piece of steak that's from a slaughtered animal and from a non-slaughtered animal. Send it to the lab. By the way, that's one of the things the Greeks hated about Judaism, is this superstition. And that's why it says, Timo kol hashmonim, that they deliberately defiled the oil. Why did they defile the oil? Because it drove the Greeks crazy. There's no difference between shemen tameh and shemen toher. Send it to the lab. You will not find a difference physically. Now, the Greeks appreciated abstraction if it was purely philosophical. But to do that Jewish thing where we attribute philosophical value, spiritual value, abstract value to physical objects, that kind of drove them nuts. That's why the Rebbe says we give Hanukkah geld. Why do we give Hanukkah geld? Because we learn it out from what the Rambam says, Pashtu Yudehem, Pashtu Yodim b'mameinim shel Yisrael, that they set forth their hands upon Jewish wealth. The Rebbe asks, why is the Rambam speaking poetically here? They set forth their hand. If they stole it, say they stole it. Why Pashtu Yodim b'mameinim shel Yisrael? So the Rebbe says, it's just like Timo kol hashmonim. They didn't steal the shemen. They didn't even vandalize the shemen. Pashtu yodim, they just touched it. They stretched out their arm and they touched the shemen. And they said, there, I didn't take your shemen. I didn't smash it. It's right there. Now use it. And the fact that Jews said, no, now it's tameh. That made them nuts. And the Rebbe says that's the same thing that they did with our wealth. They didn't confiscate our wealth. They gave it a Greek touch. They said, look, money is money. It's a physical thing. Now buy yourself something pretty. Go out for a good dinner. It's physical, let it remain physical. And we said, no, it has abstract value. It even has religious value, to the extent that we consider tzedakah ha-mitzvah. The quintessential mitzvah is money-based. Made them crazy. So what I'm saying is like this. You guys aren't following, right? Okay.
Don't underestimate us.
What?
Don't underestimate.
Don't underestimate. Okay. I'm actually, maybe I'm underestimating myself, because I'm just wondering if stuff like this is actually interesting. It's interesting to me. It's very interesting to me. I'm fascinated with it because I think this is the root of all, and yes, I will get to why this is applicable specifically to teenagers, but I think this is the root of a lot of issues that we have. And we call it materialism, but we have to know what materialism means. Materialism does not mean conspicuous consumption. That's a symptom of materialism. So there's a certain grubkeit of running after everything that's shiny and new and pretty. New cars, new technology. But materialism actually is deeper than that. Materialism means valuing the physical unto itself, as a value unto itself. So either like the Greeks, the spiritual is its own world and the physical is its own world, or not believing in any spiritual world, just believing in a physical world. You know that famous story about when the Frierdiker Rebbe was being interrogated, and he said, that little toy is intimidating for those who have one world and many gods, but I have one God and two worlds. And I always had this hunch, but then I finally saw, the Rebbe explained that story and said he didn't mean if you kill me, I'll go to heaven. It's not what he meant. He didn't mean one world and then another world. The Frierdiker Rebbe meant, right now, I am a person who inhabits two worlds simultaneously. You understand how deep that is? Who are these communists? What do communists believe? What do Marxists believe? What did Marx call his shitta, by the way? Marxism? No, he didn't call it Marxism. His Talmidim call it Marxism. What did Marx call his view of reality? Dialectical materialism. Dialectical materialism is the belief that economics, that means the competition for finite physical resources, is the sole driving engine behind every event in history on the large scale and in people's private lives. In other words, Marxism, which is alive and well here in America, not as an economic system, but as a cultural system, is the belief that there's nothing but the physical world. That's why the communists were vehemently atheistic. It wasn't just for fun. Communism and atheism go hand in hand. There's one world, the physical world. Stephen Hawking, Oliver Schnabel, said, aside from the fact that he was anti-Israel and he used his celebrity status as a celebrity scientist to hurt Israel, he also said some terrible things. One of the things he said, knowing that he's a genius and he'll be believed and not questioned, and he was a genius, by the way, he came out with a statement more than once that there's no heaven. And he knew how the Olam Goyim would take that. The Olam Goyim hears that Stephen Hawking said there's no heaven, and how do they take that? Well, that's pretty authoritative because Stephen Hawking, right, he's an expert in the whole universe. His field is cosmology. And he just said there's no heaven. Chavra, we checked out the whole universe. I mean, that itself is hubris. We checked out the whole universe. How does he know it's not in one of those black holes he was writing about all the time? But at any rate, we checked out the whole universe and there's no heaven. So he thinks, either he thinks that I think, or he thinks he can get away with pretending that I think that heaven is a physical place. He checked out the physical universe and he didn't find it. He thinks I think I can go on a rocket ship and go to Atzilus.
That's like Paro looking for Hashem in his book.
What's the story of Parai? What are you saying?
When Moshe came to Paro, and Paro said, well, I never heard of your God, he never said me present. He's not in my index of gods.
Oh, I never heard of your God. Yeah. Well, Chassidus explains that when Hashem sent Moshe to Parai, he was supposed to say to him that now you're going to know Ein kamoini ba'aretz. There's none like me on the earth. Chassidus explains that Parai actually believed in a concept of a transcendent God, but that was precisely the point. You're going to come intimidate me with this transcendent God? By definition, that God has no involvement in this physical world. And the point of the Makkais was to say, no, actually, the same God who is Haya Haiva V'yeh and transcends space and time gets involved in space and time. Ein kameni ba'aretz, in the world, davke. So we live in a world that is extremely materialistic. And by materialistic, again, I don't mean conspicuous consumption. That is one symptom of materialism. One symptom of materialism is that you have to have the newest gadget. But materialism at its essence really is just the value of material things for itself, for its own sake. And one of the problems is that you cannot be a moral person without abstract thinking. There's no right and wrong. Basic right and wrong, let alone kosher, aser, tameh, mutter, zakai. These are all concepts. They're not things. Most of Torah is learning about concepts. Imagine what a Jewish education is like for somebody who does not know how to think abstractly. And then you tell them, oh, you're not enjoying it? Well, let's learn some Chassidus, because that's really geschmack. But they can't think abstractly. Math is abstract. That's true. That's true. What?
Most people study math.
Not everybody is mathematical. No, not at all.
No, but it's taught
It's certain basic mathematics are taught everywhere. That's true. And what do we do when we teach children mathematics? We develop the capacity to relate to the axiom of numbers. We develop that capacity. Well, we start one apple plus another apple is 2 apples. That's right. And in Chassidus, that's why we use masholim. First, we tell you what it looks like in the physical world. Then we talk about what it's like in the spiritual worlds. Mibsari echse eleka. What's mibsari echse eleka? It means that when I want to teach you a lofty concept, first I'm going to try to ground it in a way that's relatable to your experience of the phenomenological universe. Phenomenological universe, that means the universe that you can experience with your senses.
Even people are very, very concrete, can't come to a place of appreciating something abstract.
Absolutely.
But it takes maturity.
It takes maturity. That's right. So our job is knowing that we are in for a long haul, and it's going to be hard work, especially with people who are not endowed with a natiya toward abstract thinking. Our job is to slowly develop the capacity to relate to, and ultimately not just to relate to, but to value abstraction. Otherwise, you have a grown adult who knows what's yummy and what's comfortable and what feels good. And it's very hard to relate to abstract concepts like, well, metor nicht. What's metor nicht? Ich kenn ja.
Can you translate? What does that mean? What is maturity?
You're not allowed. What is you're not allowed? If I'm physically capable of doing it, why shouldn't I do it?
I think actually our biggest challenge is and how do we
The problem is not the internet.
you don't think so?
No, because in the times of the Gemara, it talks about the brothels on the street that the Amoraim would have to walk around. So there were always, what? There were always open challenges in our face. The antidote is not sequestering ourselves from negative influences. Oh, by the way, if you have a child in your house and you don't have filtered internet, then you're leaving a loaded gun on the coffee table. I'm not saying you shouldn't be smart. What I'm saying is, fine, so filter the internet. That takes 5 seconds. What are we going to do with the rest of our time? With the rest of the time, what we have to do is teach abstract thinking. The Rebbe Rashab talks about in Kuntra Samayin that one of the benefits of Limud Chassidus is that inherently it makes a person more edel. It makes a person more edel, more refined. Now, what does it mean, more edel? What means refined?
If he internalizes it, if he just learns it as a chachma, it doesn't
Well, yeah, that's our job, is to help them internalize it. The Rebbe Rashab says, what does it mean to become more edel from Chassidus? As a process, I mean, what is the process? He says like this: by definition, the subject matter of Chassidus is dealing with matters for which we can only have Yedias HaMetzias and not Hasagas HaMuhus. What's the difference? I'm about to. But I'm not going to translate, I'm going to explain. Because translating, like it draws down light into this physical world. Well, that's a translation, but it's not an explanation, right? Okay, so let me explain. Yedias HaMetzias means that I'm aware that something exists, but I have not experienced it. Why have I not experienced it? Well, it could be because it's the Great Wall of China, and I haven't been there. So I just haven't experienced it yet. Or it could be something that's fundamentally not given to be experienced with the senses. So, for instance, you're learning Seder Ishtalshalis, and you're learning about different worlds and different spheroids in different worlds. That is something that, by definition, you can only have Yedias HaMetzias. I can know that it exists. And I can know that it exists, and I can know somewhat what its existence is like through comparison, through contrast, through metaphor. But I can't experience it. As opposed to what? Something for which I have Hasagas and Mahus. Hasagas Mahus means empirical knowledge. So I know what the cup of coffee is like because I drank it. Empirical knowledge. So the Rebbe Rashab says in Kuntur Samayin that one of the advantages of learning Chassidus is it makes a person edel, makes a person more refined. What does it mean? It forces you to think abstractly. Edelkeit doesn't mean you're quiet. Grubkeit doesn't mean you're loud. Edelkeit is the capacity to think abstractly, and grubkeit is the lack of that capacity. So, for instance, I'll give you an example of edelkeit and grubkeit. If you are served food and you don't like what kind of food is served, is that edel or grub? It's one or the other. You're served food, and you don't like that food. Okay, it is very grub. It is extremely grub. Why? I'll explain to you why it is. Let me give you an example that's easier. You're a 5-year-old child, and you and your sisters are sitting at the table, a bunch of little kids, and mommy has cookies, and she hands out cookies to all the children, and then you start crying, and mommy says, "What's wrong?" And you say, "Not that one, the pink one, right? Not the bigger, because bigger. Okay, it's cracked. Yeah, it's cracked. Well, I don't want the pink one. I want the green one." Okay, so that's grubkeit. Where's that grubkeit coming from? That's coming from the fact that for the child, the cookie is a thing. Now, for an adult, a cookie is not a thing. It's an experience, right? You experience the cookie. It's about the taste. Do you understand that even that's more edel? The child is so concrete that the cookie is this cookie. You know what? And if I take that one away, put it back in the package, and bring another one. There's no difference. For an adult, the cookie is not a thing, it's an experience. An experience is already an abstraction. Now, for a chacham who's super edel, a cookie is not a thing, a cookie is not an experience. You know what a cookie is? Nutrition. Now, nutrition's not a thing, nutrition's an idea. No, but that's what it says in Tanya, right, in Perek Zayin, when it's talking about Maicholas Asuris and how to be Maile, the Klippus Noiga of kosher food. It says, Bekeach achila hahi, which is a lashon pasuk, hu loy midam ispal. So basically, an edel person looks at food and says, fuel. Now, if you're served food and you say, no, not that food, a different kind of food. Okay, that's part of an Eida Lecheshbon. But the Eida Lecheshbon is, I'm not looking at what it is, I'm thinking about how it's used. So what and how are concrete and abstract. Another way of saying it is chomer and tzura. The chomer of it is what it is. Tzura is how it's used. So from a completely materialistic perspective, a piano is a piece of furniture because it's made out of the same stuff. It's a bunch of wood, it's a box, it's nailed together. That's what it is. But if you appreciate function, how it's used, then you understand, well, no, the piano, I mean, the piece of furniture, you can just sit on it, but the piano, you touch the keys and it makes these sounds and it can bring people to tears. How come there was an outcry that they killed that gorilla at the Cincinnati Zoo? Remember that, Harambe? What was the outcry based on? It was the concept that what? You say it, because this is cultural Marxism. This is materialism. What is it? What is the concept? You don't remember? Want to take a guess at it? What? Animal cruelty, right, but there was a little child there. That's right. That's right. Now follow the grubkite, because this is what grubkite doesn't mean that you got ketchup on your chin. Grubkite means this, that I don't see the value difference between a human child and an animal. But that is materialism. Materialism says 95% the same DNA. And by the way, can I tell you something? What's the discussion? What clarify? Oh, what happened? A little kid fell into the gorilla cage and they shot the gorilla to save the kid. And people were upset. Why did you kill that gorilla? You could have waited to make sure, maybe it could tear off an arm first and then you shoot the gorilla. But you shot the gorilla prematurely. Yeah, that's what people were upset about. Because a materialist says that a human and an animal are the same. Why? Because it's the same stuff. It's the same stuff. 95% the same DNA. By the way, do you think that number should bother any believing Jew? No, it shouldn't bother you whatsoever. You know why? Because you can tell me it's 100% the same DNA. I don't care. That's the body. The Tanya tells me about Gufei Umas Ha'elam, Shenidme Bechumriyosam L'Gufei Yisrael. The guf of Umas Ha'elam and Lahavda Layid, it's the same guf. Nidme Bechumriyosam. As far as the chomer, it's the same stuff. You cannot scrape cells from a body and send it to a lab and find out if this person has a neshama or not. So, somebody who is grub, meaning a concrete thinker doesn't see a difference, for sure not ben Yisrael lo amim, but not between minim medaber and chayes. Yeah.
What you're saying is very profound, and it makes a lot of sense. I teach high school girls, and I can tell you that even though Hasidus is wonderful, the challenge is getting those kids into sitting and listening.
That's right. Everyone hears this wonderful comment. We can't even get them to listen. Well, let's talk about this. Somebody who's a total materialist, you tell me, you put yourself in their shoes. How are you going to feel if somebody comes in and starts speaking abstraction? What's your experience? How do you feel? What's the feeling? And don't they say that stuff like that, obnoxious stuff like that? Well, you don't understand me. What? I don't understand you. I'm obsessed with trying to understand you. What do you mean I don't understand? You're out of touch. I'm out of touch. How old do you think I am? I promise you also, you're out of touch. You live, people pay your bills. You know nothing about real life. I'm in touch. I'm in touch. I know life. You don't know life. But they're materialists. So you come in, you talk abstraction, they don't hear anything. And then they try to listen, but they're frustrated. Frustration, right? The frustration. It's another emotion, frustration. Yeah.
There was, I don't know if you saw it, was Dr. Phil video going around about a girl that went to take her mother to Dr. Phil for help because she was really upset that her mother was not giving her more money per month to live on.
Okay.
So she was asking for $2,500 a month,
Right.
and her mother was only giving her $1,000.
Right.
So Dr. Phil says to her, "What do you think I should do about your mother?" She says, "Try to get her to give me more money."
Right.
So he got to the point where he said to her, "You're too obsessed with yourself. You have to get a job." And she started to cry. She broke down.
Okay.
So it's like
No responsibility.
there's no like.
Yeah,
feeling
but
of-
where do you think that comes from? Where do you think it comes from? A lack of responsibility. Where do you think this selfishness comes from? Listen to me. Babies are the most selfish. You know what it means that a baby is selfish? They relate to everything in terms, follow me here. I need you to focus intently for the next 3 minutes. This is an important piece, but a difficult one. Babies only relate to that which they can touch, taste, smell, hear, see. They're only sensorial. I'm asking you, how big is your universe if your only way of knowing the universe is through senses? Very small. Your universe is only about as big as your senses. That's why for a little kid, even not a baby, even a toddler, mommy leaves to go to the store, she's never coming back. She's never coming back. Because if it doesn't exist here in this room, it doesn't exist. Now, follow me. I'm still not done with the 3 minutes. When you start to think abstractly, for instance, not even think about ideas, but let's say, think about other rooms. You know, there's a room down the hall. There's another class going on. There's another speaker. There's another bunch of ladies. That's an abstraction, right? You can't see it. Well, you see it in your mind's eye. You can imagine it. So what happens to your universe as you begin to think abstractly? It gets bigger, right? Okay, now imagine you start to think in terms of values. Wrong and right, holy, unholy, or potentially holy. All these gedorim, these categories that Chassidus teach us. And now how vast and how complex and how rich is your universe? So where does the selfishness come from? It comes from an inability to think abstractly. Let me just put it very, very simply. Even the notion that other human beings have feelings is an abstraction. Empathy is an abstraction. You stubbed your toe. I didn't stub mine. Why should I feel hurt? Why should I feel bad? I didn't stub my toe. You stubbed your toe. Right? So a real concrete thinker is, I don't know, it didn't happen to me. So that's selfishness. It's not rishus. It's a cognitive disability. So we slowly expand the capacity by building a short bridge to ever more abstract concepts until we can finally speak about Elokus, we can speak about Or Ein Sof, we can speak about Atzmus, but we build it slowly. Mibsari Echse Elaka. We start with Meshalem, we start with relatable phenomena, but we build to the abstract so that this child can have a universe that's bigger than her own body. Because when you meet an adult, a grown adult in an adult body with a baby's brain who knows nothing about reality other than what she can feel with her body, shidduch crisis is just a symptom of it. Every problem that we have is a symptom of this one ill. And by the way,
So you could start with teaching empathy and that.
no, you don't teach empathy. You teach abstract thinking, which will automatically enable one to have empathy. You can't.
What I meant to say is that can you teach us abstract thinking as we were kids?
Yeah. Yes, from way in the back. Yeah. Yes. First of all, that is your agenda. That's your job. Yeah, so for instance, a really good question, it's a good question, but we don't ask it in the right way, is, how do you think I feel? See, the problem is we don't ask that question until the teenager has been wildly inappropriate and actually hurt our feelings. And once our feelings are hurt, we're not being mechanech them anymore. Now we're just defending ourselves. Once I'm hurt, once I'm afraid, once I'm in pain, I have to recuse myself until I get my act back together and I have my cool and I can come back. But how do you think I feel? I'm a human being. See, it's a great question, but we waited for the wrong opportunity. It could have been done in a very non-confrontational way. It could have been done when it was actually a real question. How do you think I feel? Like, and it doesn't have to be me. It could be anyone. A guy was telling me he had a son who was really, really hating Gemara. And I said, well, what is he like? What is he like already? He says he likes to watch, and he says, look, don't judge me, but he likes to watch videos about airplane crashes. And he's really into it. It tells like what mechanical failure there was and how it happened. He says he's a little kid, like 9 years old, but he understands like the mechanics of the airplane and how they crash. I said, okay. So basically you're telling me about somebody who's really interested in concrete things. He understands, the gears, the parts, the things. When he looks at a Gemara page, do you know what that feels like for someone who's a thing thinker? A Gemara page will have 10 cases, let's say. And every one of those cases illustrates the same legal principle. And it brings it out beautifully with 10 different scenarios. Yeah, that's if you understand what a legal principle is. A legal principle is not a thing, it's an idea. You can't slice off a piece of legal principle, put it in your pocket, and take it to the other room. It's not cake. A legal principle is an idea. So if you relate to ideas, you can say, wow, the Gemara is giving me 10 different examples from this aspect of life and that aspect of life, all about the same concept. And then it's very geschmack. But what if you're a thing thinker? How does a 9-year-old boy learning Gemara who's a thing thinker experience a lot of Gemara? What?
Like they confuse things, and I don't know Gemara, but they probably learn things to build examples of like cows.
Yeah, but even if you depict the story for him, even if you act it out for him, even if you make a model, even if you bring a cow into the classroom, he's a thing thinker. So there were 10 different stories. It's incredibly confusing. You told me 10 different stories. What do you want from my life? I can't follow. Why do you keep changing the subject? You ever heard that saying that great minds talk about ideas and mediocre minds talk about events and small minds talk about people, right? And usually that saying is to decry the ills of Lashon Hara. But really it's decrying the ills of concrete thinking. A concrete person can only talk about people. So that's how you can tell, by the way, if you're dealing with what level of intellect the conversation is at, because like where's the flow of conversation? What's the common thread? So like is this for me? What does this mean? Okay. What's the thread of conversation? So, like, let's say, and by the way, you notice with this with the Rebbe, like, the Rebbe will take, sometimes the Gemara will tell a teaching of one Amida, let's say, and then he'll tell a bunch of stories or teachings of that same Amida, and the Rebbe will not be satisfied with that. He won't just say, oh, since we were talking about this guy, we said a bunch of stuff we know about this guy. The Rebbe will say, no, there was one consistent line, there was one subject that was running through all of these teachings or stories. When you're hearing people who are thing thinkers, so when they start talking, you tell me a story, so, you want to know another thing that happened to that person. It's not that they're trying to speak Lashon Hara, that's the thread of the conversation. So a more abstract thinker would say, oh, that's a story about a particular type of experience. Here's a story about a totally different person who had a similar experience. Or a really abstract thinker would say, oh, here's a story where somebody experienced a particular emotion. And the setting is, the person is different, the setting is different, the circumstance is different, but the emotion is similar. This person experienced disappointment, this person experienced disappointment. And that'll be the thread of the conversation. What is like the classic lame women's Verbringen? Like, I never been to the lame women's Verbringens, because but I hear the reviews of them. So when my wife comes home and I ask her, how was the Verbringen? And she says, it was so lame. All they did, they sat and talked about shaitels. Yes, very good. Okay. Now, shaitels is the one that I hear all the time. So automatically, that's so grub. Why? Why is it grub? Because it's just a thing. Now, if you were talking about, let's say, the concept of kisui rosh, or you were talking about the concept of, what? Say loud, I can't hear. Right, but it would only be an abstract conversation if you could give other examples of people money gouging. Okay, so if you could say, it's not just the sheitel, it's the kosher food, right? So now it's more abstract, right? And then if you were really abstract, then you could talk about ways, let's say, come on, do this with me here. What? That's you leapfrogged. You went way too far. That's way too abstract. Let's build it up incrementally. So first we were talking about people take advantage of us with one product. But then you don't have to keep talking about that product. You can talk about another product. Eventually, you could speak. You could talk about how people take advantage of others. It has nothing to do with money. Maybe about how people take advantage of your kindness, right? And then you can start talking about selfishness. Selfishness right there is a really abstract conversation. And then you start talking about the remedy for selfishness, how to become more selfless, and you have yourself a really abstract conversation. So what I'm saying is like this. We're going to come in and we're going to find out what level the conversation's already at. But then we're going to lift it up